Hey, good morning to those of you out there on the West Coast. Good afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast with me. It is October 24th, 2023, and I'm excited to get into today's training around RFIs. But before we do, I'd like to give a little tip as a thank you for those showing up early and on time. And my tip is this. When you're reaching out to ask for something, make sure you give first. Give something before you ask for something, unless you've done the time to build a relationship, right? If you have an established relationship, you don't have to work that hard to ask, right? Some of you have been with me on the training for 2 years. So we've done over 350 trainings, and some of you have been here, 50% or more of them. And you don't have to work too hard to ask me a favor, right? To reach out and say, hey, Neil, can I get this? But when you reach out to new people, especially buyers or buyer representatives, teammates, etc., make sure that you're, first giving something a little, just being nice, a friendly gesture. The reason I came up with this tip is because I just been contacted recently by, some very large companies asking me to do them a favor. And they're billion-dollar firms, right? We are less than a billion-dollar firm, like way less. And but they're reaching out and they're just asking for something, but I have never even heard of them before. And so it turns me off. I'm like, no. And then I'm like, oh, well, okay, I'll do it. And let me reach out and actually ask them for something, because they should be giving our community something in it as well. But it's something that just helps people, right? It helps them begin to know and like us. People do business with those they know, like, and trust. And just being polite is a simple way of getting what you want out of business. Okay, so that was just a quick tip for those showing up early and on time. I appreciate you doing that. We're going to dive into the training today, which is one of my favorite topics. Let me get my screen shared. We're going to be talking about how RFIs can help you win contracts. And I really mean this, right? I believe that RFIs are one of the best tools you have in your toolbox as you proceed. And so in today's training, I want to teach you about how RFIs can help you win contracts in the federal agencies. RFIs, requests for information, also known as sources sought. They're two different things, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But that type of tool that's available to you, when you use it correctly, it will lead you to more wins. One of the things I think all of us know is that we need to meet the buyer in order to be able to sell, right? People buy from those they know, like, and trust. And so you need to meet with them so they can first get to know you and then trust you and then like you. And the challenge is, though, it's hard for a lot of us to get in, especially with program office buyers, federal buyers. How do we find their names, their numbers, and their emails to even contact them? And then how do we convince them to have a meeting with us, et cetera? There's some ways that we try that are kind of a big splash, if you will, like events, going to a conference. But those don't really work. Sometimes when you go to a conference, it's this huge amount of people there, especially if you're going to a successful conference. There might be a lot of people there, and you can come up and maybe talk to a potential program office buyer, even a contracting or acquisition shop person or representative of an agency in there. The challenge at events or conferences is that when you're talking to them, you only got this small window to talk to them, and you're trying to flood them with some information. They weren't really prepared to meet with you, right? A minute ago, they didn't even know who you were, and you just walked up and you're like sharing information about your company. So it's hard enough in that format of delivery, but also you have at a good conference, a successful conference, there's a lot of talking. So a lot of white noise out there that's crowding our mind, and especially the person you're trying to talk to. And then a bigger issue that I think with events is that the person you're trying to talk to and you're trying to make an impact with, they might have 100 people, 200, 300 people come up to them in the course of a day or a 3-day event. They're not going to be able to remember you. Even if they wanted to, they won't, because they'll meet other people they also want to remember. What we want when we meet with federal buyers is their undivided attention. I don't want to meet with a buyer and then right behind me comes somebody else who just pushes my information out of their memory and into the back, and somebody else's memories here, and then somebody else, and then somebody else. That's not a good thing for our business. We want undivided attention from our buyers. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, especially as how RFIs can help us do that. So in today's training, I want to cover down on a couple of things. First thing, I want to make sure that you understand the way I describe RFIs as sources sought and their purpose. So let me just give you a quick introduction, make sure we're all level set there. And then I want to talk to you about why it is so important to write RFI responses, sources sought responses for the win. And I'll explain what that means in a minute. And then I'm going to wrap up with when you submit an RFI, I want you to understand who's looking at that RFI and why it matters who's looking at it. Everybody's looking at it within a different criteria or agenda when they're looking at your RFI response. And so I want you to understand that. And that's what we're going to wrap up in today's training. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training where I provide tips for success in the federal market. I spent 20 years as a small business owner in the federal market, and since 2018, I've been teaching people like you that government contracting is not a secret, it's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we're going to have repeatable, predictable results. It's similar to what I should have been doing last night when I was putting my kids to bed, following the process that we have so they go to sleep. That's predictable, right? But instead, I wrestled with them and I got smacked in the head. It's a fun night, but makes for a fun day today. Hey, I want you to keep in mind that GovCon Chamber is not, we are self-funded, right? No way are we government affiliated. We do this on our own because we want to reach industry. You can look at our history and see since 2018, we've been doing this and really having good impact. But I want to thank the sustaining members who also join us and try to help us bring this kind of training to you every day. So today I'm highlighting Russ Cini, who, by the way, when I say good morning to those of you from the West Coast and way out in the Pacific on Hawaii, that's where Russ comes in, 6 a.m. live almost every single day for training. He's just got us on his calendar. He gets a cup of coffee. And he's like, okay, what am I learning today and how can I implement it in the day? So Russ, we appreciate you being a sustaining member. For everybody else, I really want you to make sure that you're helping buyers remember who you are. Buyers, large firms, small firms, they all come into our training at different points. And so put your company name and your core competency into the chat. Use 2 or 3 words to make it easy for us to remember who you are, right? I keep remembering this person who put their information in. They said cybersecurity and finance. That sticks in my head, right? And I'm able to go back to them. I just made an introduction this morning between 2 different companies that are in our world. There's nothing in it for me. It's the fun, that I think is fun and the pleasure and the privilege to be able to make introductions. Well, that's what I want you to be able to do among each other. And so engage in the chat, talk to each other, let each other know that you're open to connecting. If you don't already have a connection with me on LinkedIn, make sure you connect with me and feel free to just send me a connection request. Say, hey, great training, let's connect, right? Something simple to just help me remember where you're coming from. And also subscribe to our GovCon Success newsletter. We've got almost 10,000 subscribers. And this, again, is a pure value for you trying to grow your business in the federal market. We've got 4 more trainings coming up this week. I wanted to start just letting you know and reminding you. So today, 3 more. So today we're talking about RFIs for the win. Later on in the week, we're going to be talking about what to do after you submit an RFI. So how do you pursue it and try to drive it where you want to go? But before that, tomorrow, we're going to cover down on why federal buyers don't take your calls and what you can do about that. And then I want to wrap up the week with 6 phrases that successful contractors say all the time and the suggestions of the tips that come with those tips. So hopefully you can join me. Make sure you go click on attend and let us know that you're coming. Okay, so let's get started with, actually, before we get too far, let me know in the chat, how many RFIs have you responded to in October, right? 0, 1, 2. How many RFIs have you responded to in the last basically 30 days? But let's just say in October. I'd be really curious about that number. I want to start with just an overview of how I see RFIs and sources sought. One of the things I want to caveat this with is I'm not here to speak about RFIs and sources sought from an official FAR standpoint. I don't actually care about the FAR at that level, right? I always tell people, you don't need to learn the FAR until you're making money. Why would you waste your time learning how to, all the detailed rules? There's basic guidance, but as long as you're a professional and ethical, you'll be covering down on most of the FAR stuff. But when I talk about what an RFI is and a source is sought, I'm talking about it from a small business's sales perspective. I want you to be able to get contracts. This is one part of the process to get to contracts. So I'm not here looking to quote the FAR. I'm not looking here to talk about how the government sees it. I'm looking at communicating how you can use RFIs and sources sought to work your way into an agency, to build the relationships, identify the opportunities, and go for the win, right? So that's the direction I come. There's other people who will teach you about RFIs, sources sought, market research from a FAR perspective. Okay, so RFIs, request for information. The primary thing you want to keep in mind about this is you engaging with the program office. The program office, when they submit a true request for information, they're looking to have dialogue with industry. If it's a new requirement, they might be wanting to talk about their new requirement and, hey, this is an idea we had. What are your thoughts, et cetera? And they might do several RFIs, right? It could be a recompete that's coming out with something that was awarded before, and they're looking to say, hey, are we still on the same track? Should we be changing? For example, if they awarded a contract 5 years ago, think about how much artificial intelligence has come into the normal day-to-day part of our life, right? It has come in so much that I'm thinking about adding a day every week of artificial intelligence, teaching you how to use AI in your small business. But for the government, RFIs allow the program office to talk with industry who are their trusted advisor. When you think about the Army is not an expert at cleaning the bathrooms. Well, actually, literally, we are at that because they make us. But we're not, experts at the facilities. We're not experts at cyber. We're experts at warfare. I was in the Army, right? That's our mission. What industry brings is an expertise around the support services and products that will help us execute on the mission. And so when the program office is looking to industry, it's not some generic thing they're looking for. They're saying, hey, industry, what are you doing at other agencies? What are you doing for commercial customers or state and local and nonprofit? What are you doing in other places that we should be paying attention to? That's the idea of an RFI, right? Is having that discussion around these technical requirements and scope that the program office has. The program office has the challenges they need to address, and they have the future-looking needs that they have, right? Something as simple as how do they reduce cost using artificial intelligence? Those kind of discussions all kind of fit well into an RFI, especially if the government is using the RFIs in a way that is trying to create conversation, not just solicit, piece of marketing material and then go away. If they're really trying to engage the experts, it works perfectly for the government to shape their requirements, which goes into this last bullet, right? It's our chance to influence, and really it's the government's chance to make sure they get correct a good performance work statement or statement of work or statement of objectives, right? These documents that define the requirements. The whole idea of an RFI and engaging industry is to make sure what we're putting out, especially from the government's perspective, right? What they're putting out, they want to put out enough requirements in a clear enough way that the proposals they get back are actually going to drive to their needs and their goals and help them with their mission. And so they don't want to be putting out vague requirements. Industry can help them really shape it. When you see some of what they might have in an RFI, you can give them feedback. That's what the government wants. And so that's the idea behind an RFI, is really focusing on the program office's needs, and especially around the scope of the requirement of the opportunity we're chasing. The second one is sources sought notice. And, theoretically, and forget about how things are technically out there, sources sought are the opposite side of this. If RFIs are for the program office, sources sought are for the contracting shop. This is where the contracting shop is engaging industry, and literally sources sought. We're looking for sources. So we're seeking sources that can fill our need. And so at this point, we're not trying to have a discussion around the requirements, even though there's all this other words. We're just looking to find out, hey, can industry do this? Are small businesses able to do it? Primarily, when I see sources sought, it tends to be around small businesses, right? And the government looking to say, will small businesses show up? I did many trainings in the past few weeks, past couple of months as well, with women-owned small businesses. And what I pointed out was that $24 billion went to women-owned small businesses, but only $1 billion of the 24 was actually set aside to women-owned small businesses. Horrible, something I'm going to change. But when you look at that, one of the reasons I would submit is not because the government is looking at women-owned businesses saying, we don't really want to work with them. It's because maybe they don't have enough women-owned small businesses responding to the sources sought that gives them the confidence that enough women-owned small businesses will respond to the RFP when it drops. Right? They need, if they don't get enough responses and they set aside a woman-owned small business and they don't get qualified proposals, they have to go back to the start. And so these are some of the cautions we in the industry have to pay attention to. Sources sought is the government trying to say, hey, are there enough of you out there? Women-owned small businesses or small businesses in general, or even in industry, are there enough of you who are going to show up and compete for this opportunity or propose to us? And so it's your chance, when I think about sources sought, to influence the acquisition approach. And so when I say influence the acquisition approach, I mean things like which NAICS code is going to be used, right? This is a discussion that's great. It's happening in the government now, but sometimes the NAICS code comes out and that NAICS code has a higher threshold for whether somebody's a small business or not. And so if you're a smaller business, let's say under 5 million and below, or 10 million and below, you want to get to the smallest NAICS code. But you also just want to make sure you're getting on the right NAICS code. Sometimes the government just throws it on some generic NAICS code, but it really belongs over here. And if it belonged over here, then you would eliminate some of your competition. So these are some of the reasons you can influence. Contract vehicles, you can also be pushing for that. Certifications. I have a whole training on how to influence the government. And when I say influence, I just mean through data and evidence and having a conversation with them, whether it's on paper and verbally, but having a conversation with them and providing data and evidence that influences their decision on the acquisition approach. They're open to hearing. They're not always going to go the direction we want, but they're definitely not going the direction we want unless we talk to them and say, hey, we'd like you to go this way. Here's why. Okay, so that's just a quick high-level overview of RFIs and sources sought. I want to come into this idea that I talk about writing for the win when you send a sources sought or an RFI response, right? You can use them interchangeable. I'm pretty much talking about the RFI where they're asking for more information. Sometimes the sources sought, they basically want you to fill out a few fields and some minor questions getting answered. But when you get a chance to provide 3 pages, 5 pages or more in a response, now you're off to the races and you can write for the win. By the way, just before we get too far, over in this red box on the right-hand side, I say, are RFIs unfair or are they a shot, right? And I don't want to throw away my shot. I'm not going to throw away my shot. I hear people talk about RFIs are unfair. I actually was just hearing about it earlier in the week from somebody, and they're like, I don't really do that because it doesn't go anywhere. I get it. I get where you're coming from. But it's like a lottery ticket, right? You can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket. You can judge the lottery all day long, but guaranteed you're not going to win the lottery unless you buy a ticket. And RFIs, I look at it as a shot, right? Unlike the lottery, which is respectfully throwing away your money, responding to an RFI is never throwing away your money, because think about what else you would be doing with the time it takes to write an RFI response. What would you do? Would you go to an event that costs $500 or $1,000 or a couple $1,000s, right? Would you be, attending, trying to call a bunch of people and never getting anywhere? What would you be doing if you weren't responding to an RFI? So I want you to really think about RFIs and sources sought. They're your shot. And I'm going to talk more about this in a second. They're not unfair, right? There's a level of aspect of them being unfair, but who cares, because we can't change it. Whenever I can't change anything, I quickly turn it into let's move on, right? And so RFIs are your shot. One of the things that the government says is we don't want you to just send us a capability statement, a generic capability statement. We sure don't want you to send us marketing material. They literally are putting it in the SAM notices when they're asking for a response. Please don't send us marketing material. And the reason is because they're saying, I want a legitimate response from you. We want to think about our acquisition approach and our requirements. You industry, please provide that back. Don't send us a white paper, send us a response. Have a discussion with us in your response. And so that's why I say write for the win. When you write a response to an RFI or sources sought, write it as if it's an RFP and you're trying to beat out the competition. You're trying to win the business. One of the reasons that it's so great to respond to RFIs is because not many people do. Many people think it's unfair. It's a waste of time. They don't see it. Whatever the reason, many companies don't respond. Whenever companies look at opportunities that are not being set aside, I can almost always point to the reason not being an unfair contracting officer, but it's an unresponsive industry. Not enough SDVOs responded, and so they're not going to set it aside to SDVO. And so when not too many companies respond, you have a chance to elevate yourself above the competition, especially above the competition doesn't even show up, right? And so another way to think about writing for the win and why you want to write RFI responses for the win is because you want the agency to love you. You want the contracting shop to love you. You want the program office shop to love you. First thing to get them to love you is just respond. If you respond with a quality, it doesn't have to be the greatest thing in the whole world, but if you respond with a quality, not marketing response, the contracting shop's going to love you. Oh, thank goodness this company, they truly do want to work with us because they responded. It doesn't mean you're getting the contract, but instantly you're getting the love. They're appreciating the fact that they put something out and you responded. That's how it works, right? And the program office is going to love you because they've had questions. They're RFIs. They wanted to engage industry. And here's you coming back saying, hey, I know you were going to go to A. We're recommending you to B because of this reason. You can still go to A, but you'll have to do this, this, and this. When you provide that kind of feedback in your response, that discussion around the requirements, the program office is going to love you. Now you got these people liking you. Know, like, and trust, right? You've got them liking you in just from sending a response back. When you write for the win, right? If it's a good enough response, which is what writing for the win is, when you write a good enough response, you might get invited back to the bid. Say they get a handful of responses. They're like, you know what? We just have this on GSA, invite these 3 companies, and that's enough. Invitation only kind of bid. KOs can and I say this softly, not farly, KOs can do whatever they want, right? As long as it's following the rules and as long as it's serving the agency mission, they make the decisions. And if they've got a sufficient set of respondents in that RFI or sources sought, then they can say, hey, why don't we just do an invitation? Why don't we just tell these 3 companies, give us a bid and let's move forward, right? I'm not here to talk about all the details of the rules. What I'm trying to put in your mind is if you respond, you potentially can get invited to come bid, which goes to the last bullet I have. If you respond and they like your response, it's sufficient. It knocks their socks off, right? They can make a direct award. If you're an 8A firm, in particular, I'm talking about 8A small businesses, right? I had a customer, this happened to September, but it happened within a 4-week window. They responded to an RFI and they wrote for the win. One example of how much they wrote for the win, they went and found a teaming partner to cover down on some weakness, put their contact information or their information as well in the RFI response. And the 2 of them responded saying, hey, we're going after this. The teaming partner is going to help us bring some agency understanding, and we're going to bring all this expertise around the subject matter area. And the 2 of us, we're going to be able to really solve your needs and your requirement. They wrote this response within 2 weeks, submitting an RFI response. They got contacted by the contracting officer. Do you think you can handle the work if we set this aside direct award? So actually, it was only a 2-week window. It took a little longer to get the contract signed, but still within like a 4-week window total. That happened from an RFI response. So when you think about responding, you write for the win, you write as if they're going to be picking the winner right then and there. If you write that way, sometimes they're going to ask you to come in and potentially give a direct award, potentially bid, but always they're going to love you and always they will remember you. One thing to keep in mind, whenever I talk about responding to RFIs, sources sought, RFPs, always I talk about in your slam dunk area, in your core competency. Don't just be spam responding everywhere, but if you do cybersecurity, respond to cybersecurity. If you do facility cleaning or landscaping, respond only to that and be the best at one thing and get yourself in the door. All right, let's cover the last slide here about who looks at your RFI and why this matters. So I describe people from a sales perspective according to Neil Rackman. He put out this book, Major Account Sales, I think it's called. Yeah, you got it right there. Major Account Sales Strategy. And he describes 3 different groups of people. Focuses of power, these are the money people. Focuses of dissatisfaction, think about the program office, right? And then the focuses of receptivity. These are the people willing to help you navigate their agency, but they really don't have any influence over the requirement or the acquisition strategy. So you always want to be tracking on that. But when you write an RFI, it's a way to go right into an agency and right in front of these people without a lot of extra work. So remember, if you wanted to get into an agency and I said, hey, go find focuses of receptivity, focuses of dissatisfaction, focuses of power. I mean, I stood up an entire business line to help our customers do exactly that, getting in the door. But if you could write an RFI that gets you in the door, then you've bypassed a lot of this really hard work here. So if you write an RFI response to the Navy for a particular piece of work, let's say for PEO digital, I'm just using that as an example, you're going to get in front of contracting officers, right? They're the ones, this contract officer, contract specialist, these people in the acquisition shop, they're the ones who are going to get it and read it and record it. Hey, we did market research, we got it, right? Excuse me. The other thing about the focuses of power, is they'll put it into the repository. We received this, we're putting it somewhere. Our hard drive, the network drive, whatever tool they use, they've got it there. When the government is looking for people to reach out to, industry to do future market research, they often will look at incumbents and then people who have responded to sources sought in RFIs before. That's an extra value you get. But these people look at it, and it matters because if everything you say in there makes sense, you can begin to influence the opportunity. If everything you say in there demonstrates a compelling case that your company fits this requirement, all of a sudden the acquisition shop and the contracting officer is thinking, I wonder if this would be a good chance for us to award to this contract or to set it aside to women-owned small business, whatever it is. So then the second one is focuses on dissatisfaction. These are the people in the program office with the need, right? They have the challenges they might be facing, or they have the future goals. They're thinking about emerging technology, or they're thinking about what they're trying to do to compete against China. Whatever it is, right? They have the need. These are the ones you would work with on a day-to-day basis. When you write an RFI response in particular, and you're responding to the scope of the work that they have, and you're providing feedback, this response goes right back to the people who are going to be the technical reviewers, right? And again, I'm not speaking from a factual standpoint. I'm speaking from a sales perspective. Who's going to look at this? But the very people who are probably going to look at your proposal if you sent it. So you instantly are helping them see you and then see your way of thinking on things. And if they really like it, like I wrote a response once and the CIO was one of the people who was reviewing it, they just bypassed everything and they said, let's bring these guys in and talk. And when they talked to us, I brought in two of my subject matter experts and I was a subject matter expert. We just wowed them. They said, how can we go right with this company, right? They're looking to work with us. We've got to give them the reasons. And so when we write good responses, and a program office can see that when they do this, these technical reviewers can influence the acquisition approach to a degree by saying, we really love this. This company understands our mission, our requirements, and they have solutions that we can see would help us. And the last group is the focus of receptivity, right? And these are people like small business specialists, or in the SBA, there's procurement center representatives and your district office. If you're an 8A, your business opportunity specialist. I'll tell you right now, if I was an 8A firm and I was responding to an RFI or sources sought that was an email response, I would copy my business opportunity specialist. Just every single time, I just copy them. And in fact, I'd make sure that name says, John Smith, SBA BOS, right? So business opportunity specialist. These are people you want to be aware of that you're writing responses to RFIs so that they're there to advocate for you. Quick lesson. I learned this lesson from a contracting officer, actually, when I had my last company. She was telling me, we were doing these monthly reviews and something heated was coming up, but it had been brewing for several months. And she was like, look, you've got to copy me on every email you do within the program office. So if you send it to the core and to the program manager, copy me from the beginning. That way they don't feel like we're going out and telling mom or dad about them, right? Right from the beginning, we're just keeping everybody informed. That way, when it's time for the contracting officer to get engaged, they can help. And in this case, when I talk about focus as a receptivity, if the PCR or the small business specialist is seeing that you're writing responses, and maybe they look at that and they understand that it looks like it's a pretty good response, then they'll be able to open their mouth when the acquisition shop is going maybe on a different direction. Right? They'll be able to help you, but how can they help you if you don't keep them informed? And so when you respond, that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so here's what I want you to remember from today's training. The big thing about this, right, is that RFIs, when you respond to them, RFI sources sought, when you respond to them, it gets you in the program office. It basically gets you a meeting that allows you to tell your story without you having to even call and schedule a meeting, right? Your paper goes in and tells your story. It wows them. Same thing with number 2, right? It introduces you to the contracting shop. They appreciate the fact you even participated. And if what you sent was compelling, then they're going to sit there and begin to talk with you about this opportunity or maybe about future ones, but they're going to know, like, and trust you. So what I want you to remember as you go forward and you write any more RFIs, ask yourself, ask your company, are we writing this for the win, or are we just trying to notch up another RFI response that's out there? Hey, if you want to work with me going forward at all, love to have you reach out to us. When you're ready, you can just reach out to me. Or more importantly, just go to govconchamber.com, check out our site. You can see how you can work with us. and how my team and I can help you accelerate your growth within the federal market. For everybody, write a lot of RFIs. And remember, RFIs and government contracting, they're not secrets. It's just a process. I'll see you in the next training.